we're talking about Terraform Labs versus SEC. Now, here's the history on this one. Last September, Kwon, founder of Terraform Labs, the figurehead of the Terra ecosystem, was at a conference, Masari's Mainnet. He was going to go speak on stage, and the SEC said, "Sir, you just got served." So he was served with some papers at this conference, and he disputed, and he said, the SEC did not follow its procedures in serving me. And by the way, you don't have the jurisdiction.
Okay, Terraform Labs is being hammered by like multiple jurisdictions across the globe. We're seeing it on a lot of different fronts, international front. I was talking about this morning actually. Stablecoins are a huge issue for governments right now, and the UST debacle only highlighted that because it was an algorithmic stablecoin that collapsed. A lot of these regulators, they're looking for any reason to pounce on this subject, and so they're trying to like basically create a wall for this new product where one did not exist previously. So the UK has been looking into stablecoins recently, the EU is doing it as well. We saw that Janet Yellen was on Capitol Hill a few weeks ago talking about stablecoins. So that's like the groundwork for it. Then you have this investigation by South Korean authorities into Terraform Labs as well for the liquidations of this Bitcoin. Was it liquidated or not? And that was whole part, we can like go into that or not, probably won't right now because there's too much to talk about. But like, was the Bitcoin that they sold to defend the peg sold or not? Or did they hold it and are they like keeping it on their bankroll? South Korean authorities are looking into that. And now we have this thing with the serving and the SEC, which like you said, Zach, goes in the Mirror Protocol. Which Mirror Protocol, basically unauthorized stock market for U.S. securities. U.S. is going to have jurisdiction over that because it's their markets. It doesn't matter if you are in Singapore, South Korea, wherever. Those are U.S. securities, and so they can be enforced by the SEC. So, long story short, they got a lot of stuff going on, and it's not a great situation for Kwon or Terraform Labs. We're seeing like what I'd compare it to like the firefighters going into a burned out building and being like, okay, we're going to flip over this, see if it's burned. Okay, where did this start? What's happening here? Where was the arsonist? What can we like bring up in court to like slam these guys down? I don't know. That's my take on it. Wendy?
Okay, so this is a very big story. There is a lot to talk about. And when I hear that the SEC is going after Terraform Labs, we already know that the SEC has got their hands in everything, regardless if it's a matter at home or if it's abroad, because they've got reach. And we see them doing this a lot. But now with this new proposed bill from Senator Loomis, that may actually change to give jurisdiction to the CFTC, which I think is a very interesting time, especially to introduce this whole thing. Now, we all know that Southeast Asia is supposed to be like crypto friendly, so it makes sense that he was out over there doing his business and whatnot. But I think it's an interesting point that you brought up with the Bitcoin that was supposed to be backing this stable coin. Where is it? What happened? Because there's all these conflicting reports. We keep hearing about it in the news. We keep hearing about all these rumors on Twitter and all these other outlets. What happened to this Bitcoin? And now they're getting investigated. They got served by the SEC. But how much power does the SEC really have when it comes to going after somebody like this? And me, I like to put my little tinfoil hat on and kind of do a little bit of critical thinking here. I think it's very interesting that we heard Gary Gensler say very bad things about stablecoins, comparing them to what? Was it poker chips? Okay. So we've got, you know, these poker chips that are out there. So we knew that there was going to be very harsh regulation coming to stablecoins. Then we see UST completely depeg. And we also know that we're going to be introducing a CBDC that's coming eventually, supposedly. So it kind of feels like some of this may be kind of coordinated, but not, but it is in a way. So I'm kind of taking all of this in, you know, just kind of trying to follow the money the best way that I can and trying to make it make sense. Because how does something grow so big without any government oversight, like the SEC not coming in saying what's going on, and then all of a sudden the SEC is super excited to go after them? We obviously know, you know, there was a lot of things that happened. People lost a lot of money, which was terrible. But why did they wait this long if they cared so much about protecting investors? That's kind of my point with this story. And I want to hand it over to Jen.
Yeah, so when Kwon was served the subpoena, I don't think we could have predicted what was going to happen with UST, right? And
Some did.
Ben, relax. And so the story says that the SEC served the subpoena because 15% of users were based in the US. And I think what's happened with UST is going to give the SEC that leverage they need to go after other companies who may have a percentage of users in the US but are based and operating elsewhere. Zach, you want to jump in?
I'll jump in.
Okay.
I mean, it's easy to kick Terra while they're down, but I think that is the point of this story. That's a bit troubling. If I'm a U.S. innovator in the DeFi space and I have some exposure to the U.S. market, oh, okay, now the SEC can come knock on my door and make my life miserable for the foreseeable future. I think that is actually potentially really dampening to the innovation in the DeFi space here in the US, right? The lawsuit indicates the users. It also indicates, hey, there was a high-up sort of employee who was based here. Hey, you were working with a US-based investment fund over a certain amount of money related to this project. So if that becomes sort of the rules of engagement for how the SEC can go after people, I think a lot of the builders in this room might be pretty worried about having a presence in the US. And I think that's something that needs to be ironed out as this regulatory conversation really ramps up in DC.
I'm also, just quickly before I pass it off to you, Ben, I'm curious to see what happens in Korea because Do Kwon comes from a very prominent Korean family. I don't know what kind of sway they may have politically, but I was very surprised to see the criminal investigation come so quickly, and I'm really interested to see how that plays out. But Ben.
No, Zach, just as your point, I was super curious. Is that really surprising, though? You know, I think that the SEC's mandate is to try and protect, citizens in the country from securities, other things. Certainly, there are differing opinions on what that means. When he's got some, I'm sure. But I think, looking at that, that's a reasonable thing for the SEC to be looking at. And I think it's a risk factor you have to take into account if you're a builder looking to, attract a large U.S. audience and even have a large presence in the country. And I think the unfortunate reality is, you said, we don't want to necessarily kick Terra when it's down, but we saw what happened, and this is potentially what the SEC was worried about in the first place, and you saw people lose huge amounts of money. So, while it could put a dampening effect on some of these protocols, which is important, I do think it's not totally unexpected.
One thing I want to add really quickly is if the SEC really cared so much and was so concerned about protecting people, why couldn't they get their stuff together and start to establish more clear guidelines in the last few years? Like, Bitcoin has been around for a decade plus. Altcoins have been around for quite some time. And if you're so concerned with protecting people who need to be protected, why weren't there guidelines established so that they could go after these bad actors more aggressively?